Come on in, everybody. Welcome. Sit down, get yourself a nice beverage to drink. We're gonna go over this week in space, starting today, October the 28th, the year of our Lord 2024, going all the way till November the 3rd, talking about Halloween, Day of the Dead, and a lot of stuff that's going down in space this week. We got a lot of transits, we've got a lot of action, some intensity, some high drama. So, yeah, sit down and relax and let's hash this out, shall we? Before we really jump into the astrology of the week, I just want to make a couple announcements. You may or may not know this, but I have a weekly astrology themed radio show that comes out on SoundCloud and sometimes Spaz Radio. It's called the Melee Report, and it is my love letter to the cosmos. And in this show, usually I play music that is related to the transits, the astrological transits of the week. And so I'll play a couple songs, talk about them, talk about how they relate to what's going down in space. I just recorded it late last night. I will put a link in the YouTube, and also I will put a link in my stories after I'm done with this report. I urge you to check it out because that will give you a much more musical and lyrical context to what's going down in space. Also, I bring this up because for the past 4 years that I've been doing this show, for Halloween, I do a little something something that I like to call the total request for the Dearly Departed Halloween Extravaganza. This one will be volume 5. And in this show, this epic show, it is all composed of dedications from the listening audience, that's you, to people or animals or pets or things that we love that have passed on. So I'm bringing this up because if there's somebody who has left this mortal coil that you would like to honor through song and celebrate through dance, let me know. Hit me up. Tell me who you are, who you are sending your shout out to, what song you would like to dedicate to them, and if there's a short dedication that you would like me to read on the air, let me know, and we will get that in the show for you. The show goes as long as it needs to. I think last year was like 3.5 hours. The year before that was 4 hours. So I just want to open that up to the listening public out there because I can't do it without you. And I think that this is a great way of honoring those that we love who have passed on. The other announcement that I just want to put out there before we get to the astro weather, before we get to the real nitty gritty of it all, I'm going to be doing a year ahead 2020 deep dive into 2025 astrological forecast with Michael Bartlett, Lindsay Turner, and Sam Reynolds. This is going to be happening live and in person in Santa Fe, New Mexico on November the 9th. We will also simulcast it out through the tubes of the internet to the entire world. So wherever you are, wherever you find yourself on November the 9th, you can tune in and check us out. There's a link in my bio. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes on the YouTube. So if you're kind of curious, interested, suspicious of what's going to be happening in 2025. This is a great way to get your sort of full year overview, so you know what's coming at you. Last thing that I'll say is that tonight, me and Lindsay Turner and their collaborator Sarah, whose last name I can't remember, but who's brilliant. We're beginning a 4-part lecture series on possession and exorcism through a theological lens, psychological, and astrological lens. Lindsay and Sarah will be doing the first 2 parts tonight and tomorrow. That's the 28th and 29th. And then I will be speaking about the psychology of possession and exorcism on the 30th. And then we'll be doing a roundtable discussion on the 3rd, I believe, about astrology and possession. So if you are interested in all that spooky stuff, I think you can still sign up if you act fast. So I will again put a link in the show notes for that. And that's all the advertisements that I have. Now let's get on to this week in space, space, space. All right. This is a big one. A lot going on. I'm going to cover as much as I can before I get way too tired and need to take a nap. Um, Sort of the brief overview of what we are getting this week is we are going to be experiencing a new moon in Scorpio, which is going to be trine Saturn and Pisces. We also have a grand water trine going down between Mercury and Scorpio, Neptune and Pisces, and Mars in Cancer. The kind of big news of the week is at the end of the week, we have a Mars opposition to Pluto, which is perfecting, but you're probably feeling that already. If you're feeling a little agitated, a little anxious, a little nervous, maybe a little activated, that might be that Mars opposite Pluto, which we'll be talking about towards the end of this show. And then we also get Chiron trining Venus and sextiling Jupiter, a little healing action in there, and we get a Venus opposition to Pluto at the end. Sorry, Venus opposition to Jupiter at the end of the week. So a little bit of resource. We got some resource from the water trine, the grand trine in water, and we get some resource from the opposition of the benefics. But this Mars opposition to Pluto is pretty intense. We also have a Venus square to Saturn, and we have this like really like I want to say dark Scorpio new moon, like, deep, dark, right? Gothic. We have a very gothic new moon in Scorpio. So we'll be talking all about all of that this week. So starting off today, Monday, October the 28th, we have Mars in Cancer trining Neptune, who's retrograde in Pisces. This is going down at 27 degrees and 34 arc minutes of these water signs. And then Mercury will be coming in a little later in the week to sort of perfect that grand water trine. But let's just talk about this Mars Neptune piece because I think this is a big one. Um, so a trine is a harmonious aspect where these planets are sort of vibing with each other. I don't think that Mars and Neptune are necessarily like on the same page a lot of the time because Mars is like willpower and action and direction, it's drive, and Neptune is like, why bother? Right? Mars is like, I want to go over there, I'm hungry. Neptune's like, what's hunger? What's an appetite? What's desire? Like, why don't everything is everything, so why care? And I think Mars gets really frustrated with that. However, with a trine, they're sort of like in alignment, they're on the same page, they're kind of vibing with each other. And so Neptune you can think of as associated with the dream, the sort of bigger vision, and Mars with action, right? So we have the opportunity to take some martial action to move towards actualizing our visions, our dreams. Right. So something to think about today and, kind of through this week is like, what is that big vision? What is that initiating dream? Right. What is that sort of calling or spiritual calling that you might feel connected to, and then what are the actions that we can take to sort of move towards that, right? So I think when they're in alignment, Neptune is like, this is the vision, right? And Mars is like, cool, I'm gonna do this. And I think about like, something like Fitzcarraldo, right? Like where he's like, I'm building an opera house in the Amazon, right? And I'm just doing this, and everything is kind of in service of that vision. Even carrying a paddle boat over a mountain, right? And so we like see that in the film, and we also see that with Werner Herzog kind of making that film and everything being in the service of that vision, which also gets very kind of monomaniacal and a little insane, right? So I think that Mars can be so wrapped up in the vision that they can kind of forget about the impact that they might be having on other people, on the environment, on other ecosystems, and on like other people's lives, right? And I think that one of the kind of downsides of this is this kind of zealotry or like a total obsession with my vision or my dream or my purpose that Mars just gets that like total narrow focus. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, right? I think Neptune can bring a lot of creativity through this kind of greater vision, this kind of divine inspiration. And then Mars is able to take action based on that feeling of inspiration and that kind of connection with the like higher self or that sense of divinity, right? So today, tomorrow, throughout this week, just noticing what inspires you and what you can do to begin taking action to bring that vision into our physical reality or to move yourself closer to that vision. This is also really good for charity, spiritual practice, creativity, right? Taking altruistic action for the good of the whole, the good of the collective, right? Selfless action, right? Uh, this can also look like sacrifice for the greater vision, right? And Mars in Cancer has a lot of like protective energy, and Neptune can be a bit of a martyr, right? So this can look like sacrificing oneself for others or for the cause or for the greater vision, right? You know, coming back to like Fitzcarraldo, right? Sacrificing oneself, right, and one's well-being to see the vision that is achieved, right? Or like killing oneself for the vision, which can be really great. And also, I don't know, like maybe that sort of sense of martyrdom, creative martyrdom is like played out a little bit, right? And maybe that goes into the like suffering artist, which I think is maybe a 20th century vibe. And like now that we're in a new century, we can maybe do something different, right? And you know, if you are inspired, when one is inspired, you got to like follow that through. But what are ways of doing it that don't require us to like martyr ourselves, you know? Um, this can like the greater vision can also be one's family, one's job, art projects, right? One's country. Cancer is really connected to the sense of belonging, right? And looking for the place where they fit in and where they're accepted. And so Mars is kind of willing to fight for that feeling of belonging, and it's willing to defend the places and people where it feels it belongs to, right? Which can be really beautiful. But also, with Neptune associated with that dream or bigger vision, this can be, again, like very creative or supportive of our communities. And it can also, be self-sacrificing, and it can sort of move towards like patriotism, sacrificing oneself for the motherland, right? Mars and Cancer can feel really emotional about like the homeland and the willingness to fight for it, or like whatever the sort of community that we belong to or system that we belong to. And this can be beautiful, and it can also be really scary, right? Especially when we pull in that like Neptunian devotion, right? And unwavering belief, right? Or even kind of divine calling. And this can bend towards like zealotry or fanaticism, right? And so this is sort of the downside. And a trine, again, is a free flowing aspect, right? Where there's like this easy communication between, in this case, Mars and Neptune, which can look great, but it can also like be kind of unconscious in some ways, right? So like I'm willing to fight and defend what I care about, and then taking that to a level of like monomaniacalness or like zealotry or fanaticism or us versus them belief, right? And so it can bring like this very narrow focus. And the idea that this is the only vision, or this is the only way, or this is the only right thing, right? And so in the Odyssey, and Jason Hawley talks about this in he does a series called Cosmos and Psyche. No, or he does a series about the planets through myth and psyche, but that's through Astrology University, and I think he's released it on his website now. But in his Neptune talk, which I really appreciated, he uses the story of the Odyssey as kind of a framework for thinking about Neptune and these different aspects of Neptune. And so one of the stories in the Odyssey is the story of Polyphemus, or the Cyclops, right? Which is a way that we can think about Neptune. And I think with Mars kind of coming into this harmonious relationship with Neptune, we can really see that kind of monomaniacal, like single focus vision, right? And Polyphemus, the Cyclops, is also Neptune's child, and because of this interaction, it's what really screws Odysseus and keeps him sort of lost at sea for hella long. And so like with the Cyclops, we have this one eye, this narrow focus, this single focus, right? And in James Joyce's Ulysses, the Cyclops is depicted as the citizen in episode 12 of Ulysses. And I think that this is a really interesting thing to think about. I don't want to be like pretentious bringing James Joyce or Ulysses into an astrological talk, but I think that this is a really interesting way of perceiving the Cyclops or somebody with a narrow focus, because the citizen is this narrow-minded Irish nationalist who is utterly uncompromising and xenophobic, right? And so this is like a total patriot who's like my way or the highway, bro, right? And a quote that I took from the Sparks notes, the citizen here represents a particular kind of Irish nationalism that bases itself on an idea of racial purity. The citizen is us versus them logic, which allows him to sustain a single-minded, one-eyed personal and national mission, right? And so, I think that this is a way that the Mars and Neptune relationship can show up, right? And so we can see the single focus of the Cyclops, which can manifest as xenophobia, nationalism, which can become right, activated by this relationship of Mars and Neptune. And, I bring this in because I think that we are living in a time with a lot of rhetoric around xenophobia, nationalism, very like narrow focus. And, I also see this, in America, we have a two-party political system, and we have this kind of black and white. It's either us or them, right? And I think each side can, in a two-party system, can get very kind of single focused or narrowly focused and fall into that kind of Cyclops thinking, that Neptune and Mars Cyclops narrow focus, right? And so in the Odyssey, Odysseus defeats Polyphemus through cleverness and trickery. Right? He says, "My name is," when the Cyclops asks who he is, he says, "My name is nobody," which is genius, by the way. Right? Which also is a maybe another Neptunian quality, right? Of non-existence, of non-being, right? Letting go of the sense of ego or ego identity. And we can find this maybe in unskillful ways of like falling into the mass of a like patriot, sort of a national movement where we lose our identity. And also maybe we can find this in a more spiritual sense of letting go of ego consciousness, right? Anywho, Odysseus and his men put out the Cyclops single eye with a sharpened stake, which is a very martial thing to do, which leaves the Cyclops blind and unable to see. And when the other Cyclopses come to his aid and ask him who did this to him, he says, "Nobody hurt me," right? And they're all like, "Okay, buddy, like, guess you're cool. There's nothing we can do about this," right? So there's this sense of non-being, right, or non-attachment that allows Odysseus and his men to sort of move through or move away from this monomaniacal focus, this sort of single lens of the Cyclops, right? And so I think the challenge with um, uh, yeah, and so I think one of the questions is when we only have one focus and we lose that, what do we have left? If we only have our identity with like this party or this movement or these people or this group or this family, and we lose that through, whatever happens, right? What do we have left? Right. And so how do we have kind of this non-identification? How do we be nobody, right? And still be in the world? And I think the challenge with Mars and Neptune is to hold a bigger vision and not get narrowed down into that monofocus of the Cyclops, right? And this can also show up as black and white thinking. And how do we maintain the multiplicity while striving to take action towards our greater vision? Um, yeah. Also on Monday, October the 28th, hold on, let me take a sip of this. Uh, Okay, also on Monday, October the 28th, that would be today, we have Venus in Sagittarius squaring Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 15 degrees and 58 minutes. Is that correct? Sorry, let me just double check that real quick. 12 degrees, 58 minutes. I'm sorry. Yeah, correction there. The Venus in Sagittarius squaring Saturn in Pisces at 12 degrees and 58 minutes. Um, We have Venus, which is relationships and values and connection and beauty and aesthetics, and Saturn, which is isolation, which is cold, which is lonely, which is discipline, which is hard work, right? These things maybe at cross purposes just by their very nature, even though Saturn is exalted in Venus's sign of Libra. The sort of there is a tension between I want to go and party and see my friends, and like I have a ton of work to do and I need to be alone, right? I don't know if any of y'all feel that, but like that is sort of a daily experience for this wizard right here. Anyway, in a square, we have this sort of challenging aspect. Yep. Ashley is saying hands up right there. Feel you. So maybe you'll feel right at home in this tension between that Venus, like I want connection, and that Saturn, I want isolation or solitude, and a square brings these two planets into tense aspect, sense of them being at cross purposes. And I think squares, like all hard aspects, are seeking some form of integration. So one of the ways that this might play out is pressure on relationship, right? More responsibility in relationship, more demands in relationship. Also, maybe more responsibility around our values and being responsible for our values, right? Learning to honor our values, what we like and what we don't like, because it's very easy to be like, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, but when the rubber hits the road, when the pressure is on, it is harder to show up for that, right? And so being able to honor our values or the Saturnian pressure may be helping us to get in deeper touch with our values, right? To notice what is really important to me when the rubber meets the road, when the Saturnian pressure is on, right? Um, Venus, wants to be in relationship, is about friends, is about community. Saturn is isolating and lonely, right? And so we might feel separate from others, right? We might feel like we need to take a step back, or we want to take a step back, or we might feel left out, right? We might feel like we're having difficulty connecting, right? Venus is also about love and beauty, right? And Saturn is cold and gray, right? Saturn is the metal or associated with the metal lead, right? Which is gray, which is heavy, right? Venus is light and, wants to be around beautiful things, right? And so we might have this kind of like lead pressure, everything taking on this sort of like cold uniform, like Soviet bloc lead coloring, which can make us feel like separated from what is beautiful and what brings us joy, right? So we might have difficulty accessing our joy. And this might bring in feelings of heaviness or depression, right? And so anytime that we are dealing with this sort of lead weight of Saturn, the kind of feelings of isolation, that sort of feeling of depression, I think it's really important to tap into our Venusian values, yes, and also to tune into what we find beautiful, to find connection with aesthetics, right? To go to a museum to breathe in beauty, and this is the kind of like Marsilio Ficino's remedy for Saturn, right? Is a kind of opposite action to the Saturn, like heaviness, bring in lightness, bring in joy, bring in beauty, right? To try and find that balance, right? And learning how to integrate beauty and pleasure with the Saturnian structure, right? Because Saturn wants structure and wants discipline, right? And this might feel at odds with the Venusian like desire for pleasure, but I think that what Saturn helps us to do is develop really good boundaries so that we can have more pleasure, right? So that we can have better connections. And yeah, I'm glad that I'm glad that this is resonating with you, Ashley. Okay, so yeah, again, Saturn is also boundaries, and the square might help us to recognize where we need to honor or implement boundaries in our lives and relationships, right? So we might need more structure somewhere, right? And where might that be? How do we like structure play? How do we structure enjoyment? What are the structures that we can bring in so that we can be a little bit more open to love and connection, right? Because it's maybe like not that skillful to just be like, anything goes, whatever, yes to everything. And I'll be talking more about that in my discussion about exorcism in a couple of days. Right. Also, like, where can we use more silence and solitude? Right. Seeking this balance between solitude and social life and recognizing what is right for you and honoring that balance. And I think that with this sort of tension, right, if we're feeling that depression, maybe we need more connection, right? But also if we're experiencing too much connection and sort of too much socializing and losing sense of ourselves, maybe we need more solitude. Maybe we need more structure around how we are showing up in relationship, right? How we are showing up and participating in activities that bring pleasure and bring joy. All right. And we'll also be talking more about that at the end of the show, because on Sunday we're getting an opposition between Jupiter and Venus, which I think that the lessons that we learn about boundaries, limits, structure, and discipline from the Saturn square will be very valuable when we have this opposition between the benefics at the end of the week, because that can lend itself towards overindulgence. And, everything in moderation, even moderation, might be something that we can think about with Venus this week. Okay, moving on to Wednesday, October the 30th. We have Mercury in Scorpio opposing Uranus in Taurus. This is going down at 25 degrees and 57 arc minutes of these fixed signs. And so with Uranus and Mercury in the evolutionary context, they talk about Uranus being maybe like the higher vibration of Mercury. Not better, but Mercury is maybe like more terrestrial. Uranus is outer planet, so maybe like more universal, right? And so both of them kind of dealing with insight, dealing with the mind, right? Uranus might be the sort of ideal beyond the kind of gravity of the Saturnian realm, right? This is the ideal vision, right? And with this relationship between Mercury, which is our cognitive function, and Uranus, we might have some inspiration from that ideal, from that trans-Saturnian realm, right? From that Uranian vision of like, this is how it is when it's right, or this is what, this is how it should be, right? And maybe we get some insight from that. Uranus brings a sense of breakdown and breakthrough, right? Which can be really helpful, right? Everybody wants the breakthrough, right? But no one really wants to deal with the breakdown. And this can bring a lot of nervous system activation. And so, middle of the week, we might be receiving a lot of insight, but also might be feeling a lot of like nervous energy or feeling a lot of activation in our nervous system. And so, just thinking about the ways that you can down regulate, the ways that you can support your nervous system, right? So, maybe don't be slamming coffee and energy drinks during the middle of the week, or maybe, right? Or maybe just ride the lightning. But just be aware that like our nervous systems can be activated and it can bring some burnout, right? Um, I think that as we are connecting in with this relationship between Uranus, the sky god, and Mercury, the messenger, right, it can bring some clarity. It can help us solve problems, and it can also provide inspiration. Um, Mercury in Scorpio is kind of interested in knowing things deeply, right? Knowing things from the inside out, like crawling all up in it, right? And getting to the heart of things, right? Uranus might break down some of the barriers that we experience so that Mercury is able to know, right? Or it might provide mercurial innovation so we can really get to the core of things. However, this might not be easy, right? And we might find out things we didn't really want to know in that kind of like mercurial searching. Uranus might be like, cool, bada bing, bada boom, right? Like, there you go. That's the thing that you've been looking for. And you're like, oh, damn. Like, actually, I wish I didn't see that. I wish I didn't know that, right? So it might be like, TMI, right? Like way too much information that you didn't want to know, that you don't really want to hold, right, for somebody else. Secrets might get spilled, right? We might learn uncomfortable things that might feel a little destabilizing, right? Yeah, somebody saying Mercury as the investigator, right? Or like the detective. And which is great, but if we get some shocking Uranian information, then we have to deal with that, right? And it might feel overwhelming, it might feel too much, it might feel kind of gross, right? So just like careful what you wish for, right? As we are kind of in this relationship with Uranus, who is also the Promethean like firebringer, bringing the wisdom, right? And Mercury, who's like really digging deep to like get that information. Yeah, and things that come up might be like spooky, right? Because, we're talking like Halloween season, right? And in this time of the year, around Samhain, right, the veils are really thin. And so this is an opportunity to access, right, psychic information or information from the unseen world, right? But also like sometimes that can be really overwhelming. Also, I think one of the things that I think about with this time of year is we're talking like ancestral magic, right? We're talking necromancy, we're talking information from the spirit world, and we're talking about like tuning into our ancestors and our ancestral lineage. And we might be finding out things about that is not, that might be helpful, but also might be really hard. So just like um, stay aware of that, right? Ooh, nice. That sounds awesome. Um, I love a fun, spooky, good time, right? And that is my Scorpio rising talking here. And so like one of the things that I'm thinking, and this is also coming off of that Saturn square, is like having good boundaries around the kind of information that we are taking in, especially if we're taking in information or engaging with the unseen world, having really good boundaries for ourselves, right? So that brings us to All Hallows Eve, Thursday, October the 31st. And we get Mercury in Scorpio, trine Neptune, retrograde in Pisces at 27 degrees and 30 arc minutes. And so this is kind of perfecting that grand water trine, right? So this is great for emotional regulation, feeling into what we know emotionally or intuitively, right? This is also, I see the water signs as being quite psychic, right? Especially yeah, being psychic. And so like Mercury again, cognitive function, being able to like receive information from the unseen world, right? And so we also might be finding ourselves responding or reacting from an emotional place, right? Especially if things are feeling like very porous right now. How do we sort of recognize, is this mine, right? Is this my feeling, or is this a feeling that I'm picking up from the collective, or is this a feeling that I'm picking up from this space, right? From this party, from this graveyard, right? Like, is this my feeling, and is this a feeling that I want to hold, right? Um, we also might be like responding from places where we don't really necessarily have the facts, but we might have a deeper knowing or a deeper understanding. However, Neptune has a reputation of being quite confusing, right? So just watch out for reacting emotionally, right? Or getting a little bit of information and being like, that's the thing. And then Mars is like, it's on, right? I can't believe you said that, right? Or like, I'm doing this. And so, right, always good to take a breath before we like dive into action, especially whenever Neptune is involved, because they can be rather confusing. And you might want to like phone a friend before you uh yeah, Lynn saying feeling very porous and saturated. Yeah, I think that like is that kind of grand water trine, especially with Mercury, Mars, and Neptune. It's like, very open and like feeling, emotionally saturated or even flooded, right? And so figuring out the ways, right? Now, I like to think about a trine again as harmonious and helpful. How do we irrigate, right? How do we kind of create irrigation channels for that, like all of the emotional, watery information that's coming in as we are being kind of deluged by the world? How do we channel that away into creative pursuits, into connection, into things that feel nurturing and supportive, right? And thinking about like how we can be with our feelings, right? And I think that having these kind of irrigation channels allows us to be with what feels like the right amount of feeling and then channel some of it away so that we don't get overwhelmed or flooded, right? And also thinking about how we tune into our intuition. How do we connect with our dreams and our visions? How do we connect with the unseen world over Halloween, right? Over this time, over this water trine. And how do we really honor the intuitive parts of ourselves, right? And I think that water is really about connection. And so, how do we come deeper into connection, right? And this is with each other, with ourselves, with the unseen world, with our ancestors. And, to also consider like, what do you want to deepen your connection with? Okay. Friday, November the 1st, we have a new moon in Scorpio. This is going down at 9 degrees and 35 arc minutes of Scorpio. The sun and moon are conjunct. This will be exact at 5:47 a.m. Pacific time, making that 8:47 a.m. Eastern time, if I got my math correct. So, like, as you are waking up from your, either as you're going to bed or like starting to wake up from your Halloween hangover, we'll get this new moon in Scorpio. This is going to be trine Saturn, which brings sort of, some ancestral weight to it, but also maybe like some stabilizing structure, which I think can be helpful. All of the aspects that we're talking about throughout this show, I think, are activated in this new moon in Scorpio. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on it, but I think that this is an opportunity for depth. I think that this is an opportunity to go within. I think it's an opportunity to connect with the unseen world. And I think that this is an opportunity to plant the seeds of transformation. I think a lot of the astrology of this work is about catharsis, right? It's about kind of moving through big emotional material and finding the ways that we're able to resource ourselves so we can really go to that depth, so that we can excavate what is deep within us and kind of transform it and move through it. So because we are starting to run out of time and we got a little bit more to talk about, I'm going to skip to Sunday, November the 3rd, which is the end of this week's report and also kind of the big stuff that's going on. So on Sunday, November the 3rd, we have Mars in Cancer opposing Pluto in Capricorn. This is happening at the haunted anaretic degree of both of both Cancer and Capricorn. Um, these are cardinal signs, right? Pluto is like at the very edge of Capricorn, and Mars is sort of really activating that like very edge of Pluto's journey through Capricorn. This is the first of three oppositions. This one occurring on the 3rd. The second one will be January 3rd when Mars is retrograde. Mars will be at 1 degree of Leo retrograde there, and Pluto will be at 1 degree of Aquarius. And then again on April 26th, Mars at 3 degrees of Leo, now moving direct, and Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius, and both those in 2025. And so this kind of aspect is going to be unfolding over quite a while, over the next 6 months, 5 months. So, hold on to your butts, right? And this is not an easy one. This can bring up power struggles, survival fears. We can, Pluto is about the shadow. It is about transformation and death and rebirth, and like that's great. It's also about initiation. All these things sound really good, but in practice, it's really about survival fears. It's about our shadow. It's about the things that we repress and suppress, and the things that we're terrified that they're going to seep into the system and overwhelm us. Right? Mars is about action, and so when we have a hard aspect between Pluto and Mars in this way, what can happen is that we have Mars takes action from in response to the repressed instinctual and psychological material that Pluto holds in the shadow, right, in the underworld. And so our sort of like underworld fears erupt into the volcano of martial action, which can look really messy. It can end up violently. It can be destructive, right? Ultimately, this is a catharsis and a moving through of this energy which has been repressed or like pushed away or suppressed, right? Which is healthy to move that energy through. However, if we do it in unconscious ways, it can be really destructive. right? And, destruction and creation are kind of two sides of the same coin, but we also want to I don't know, we want to like be conscious of our actions and the impact of our actions, because what we don't want to do is like destroy something that is really beautiful and create a harder situation for us. And like ultimately in the sort of like Neptunian vision, it's like, what does it matter, right? You'll just come back and do it again, which is like that can be fine if you want to like stick around samsara, right? And like keep untangling the ball of thread, which like whatever, we may be doing that anyway. However, we don't want to make things harder on ourselves because they're hard enough as they are. Right. We want to find emotional catharsis. We want to find release. We want to take action to create transformation in ways that are generative and not ultimately like holding us back or creating more harm or suffering or destruction in the world. Right. And so, one of the things that I'm thinking about with this opposition, right? We have like survival fears and Pluto being activated, right? And Mars goes on guard. Mars wants to take action in response to these survival fears that are activated. And so, what happens when we become activated? We go into our sympathetic nervous system. Right, we get tense, our heart rate increases, we come out of social engagement and we go into a fight or flight response. And so, an easy way to notice this over this Halloween season is the next time you are watching a horror movie, um, right, you can notice the feeling of activation in your system, right? When whoever is being chased by the axe wielding psycho killer, right? What's happening in your body, right? You feel like heart rate increasing, breath gets shallow, you might feel your like hands tensing, right? And so when we are in that state, right? Blood leaves the brain and the belly and goes into the limbs, preparing for that fight or flight response, right? Preparing to take action, right? So Mars is getting all set, right? And so in that activated state, we're thinking about what we need to do to be okay. And it's less, we are worrying less about other people, right? And like what other people might need. And sort of the focus goes very much into our ego survival drive and need. Right. And so, for example, you might find yourself watching this horror movie over Halloween, gripping your partner's hand really tightly, right? To the point where it might hurt them, but you don't notice because you are so activated, right? So, like, unconsciously, you are creating harm to this other person, not in a big way, right? But you're not really thinking about, like, oh, is this person okay? Because you're like, oh my God, don't go in there. Oh my God, I wouldn't go in there. No, turn around, right? And so Mars and Pluto brings up this activation in these deep survival fears, right? Pluto is our biological needs, and these like our need to survive. Mars is action, and so in this opposition, the actions that we take are based on our instincts and our survival fears, not based on social connection, right? Not based on what is good for the whole, right? Um, and so what we are experiencing on a collective level is an increase in activation based on instinctual fears and survival needs. And I think that this is really being amplified in the US presidential election, right? Which is being framed in a very apocalyptic way, right? And it feels really scary, which I just want to make a plug right here. Go and vote. I don't care who you vote for, but just do it, right? I don't really want to get into like the ins and outs of it, but like this is my personal opinion that people have fought and died for the right to vote. And it's an important way to honor those people who have come before us and the people who will come after us by exercising this right. And again, I don't care who you vote for, but I don't know, we have it, and I think it's important to use that, right? The other thing that I want to say is just be aware of your levels of activation, right? Towards like all through this week. Check in with yourself and see if you're operating from a activated or dysregulated place, right? And if those feelings of activation are motivating you to act in certain ways, right? And to think about what you can do to come back into a sense of social engagement, right? So that you don't go into a total like shutdown state and like overwhelm and like shut down and collapse, right? Which is the dorsal vagal response in the polyvagal theory, which we're talking about. So, what can you do to discharge some of the activated energy so you can come back into a sense of connection with yourself and with other people, right? And I think one of the issues with like the survival fears is when we are operating from that place, we are only really thinking about ourselves and our own survival. And one of the lessons that I have really taken from Pluto's journey through Capricorn is how do we consider the most vulnerable among us? Right? How do we not just operate from a place of this is what I need, but how do we broaden that perspective, right? Broaden maybe that Cyclops view into thinking about like who may have less power, right? Who might have less privilege, and how can those sentient beings be supported? Right? And how do we step outside of privilege or base survival fears and make decisions that can support people, places, and things and all sentient beings that might not have the same access to power and safety? Right? And so this transit is also about a release of energy, about catharsis, right? Pluto, again, what has been suppressed, rejected, shoved into the shadow, so that we can fit and operate in society, right? And all that energy is buried deep within the psyche. It's everything that we disown, everything that we project outward onto others. It's everything that terrifies us, right? And so Mars is action, right? And an action that is in relationship to those fears, to that terror, to that projection, right? Um, uh, and so in this like opposition, action is taken in relationship to that deep instinctual energy that has been suppressed, right? It's like this volcano, like I was saying, and all of that powerful instinctual magma of Pluto gets released through Mars and martial action. And so Mars in Cancer might be operating from a pretty emotional place and be making emotional decisions. And again, we have Mercury kind of trining them, which is maybe like helping us to think a little bit more about like, okay, if we do this, what happens, right? Helping us to be a little bit more in our left left brain, right? Logical brain. Um, you know, the and eruptions might allow for a release of repressed energy, and this might be helpful in the long run, but it also might be pretty ugly or even dangerous to be around, right? So this can look like political violence, fights, arguments, self-destruction, self-harming behaviors, road rage, or various other forms of eruptions, right? And so the idea is to be able to release some of this pent up emotional and instinctual energy in conscious ways. And one of the ways that I think that we can do this is through holidays and collective ritual and collective forms of catharsis. And I think that Halloween is actually an amazing way to engage with this and to engage with the suppressed and repressed energy of the shadow. And so when we dress up, we can embody a different persona, right? And we can safely play out some of this shadow material in a socially acceptable ritual context, right? We can take on a different perspective. We can give voice to a part of ourselves that is not socially acceptable in normal life, right? This gives an expression to all of that shadow energy. Right. And so during Halloween, we can engage in taboo and forms of sexuality, which are not usually acceptable. Um, right. So like we see like there's cross-dressing, there is like over sexualization, there's expressions of sexuality, there's expression of deep desire, there are breaking of social norms and taboos, right? And all of this is in a kind of festival ritual context where it's okay to dress like that, to dress like a different gender, to gender bend, to explore different forms of desire. And I think that this is really important because these things get shoved away and put into the shadow. And one of the things that you see during Halloween is like men dressing like women, like across the board, right? And it's okay in that context. I mean, I think it would be better if more men dressed like women, just like across the spectrum, not just because women's clothes are a lot cooler than men's, but there's a form of like liberation of not being held in a box. But Halloween provides that catharsis and provides the ability to break those social norms and taboos, right? There's also kind of ritualized violence, right? Played out through costumes of killers like Freddy, Michael Myers, right? Giving free expression to the sort of id desire for violence. Right. And so we also project the demons into the world and we embody our fears in the container of this ritual, which I think is a great way of working with the shadow. So we don't actually have to enact uh, these uh, uh, these forms of violence in reality, right? We can enact them in this sort of ritualized play, which is a great way of working through these things and working through our fears. We also watch scary movies, which help us to release those fears and help us to like kind of release some of that activation that we fear. The collective fear of the world, which there is a lot, right? And it's all moving through our bodies. And so being able to like watch things that allow us to scream and shake and like feel terror in socially acceptable ways can be a really healthy way of experiencing the fear without having to carry it, right? Lastly, we honor our ancestors and we remember our dead. And again, let me make a plug for my total request for the Dearly Departed Halloween Extravaganza Volume 5 radio show. So if you have a family member or loved one that you would like to honor through song, hit me up and we will get that in the radio show for you. And I think that one will be coming out on the Day of the Dead. Anywho, right, during Halloween, we're able to remember our dead through song and dance, through feeding them, through cleaning their graves, through just remembering them, through lighting candles or however you're able to do it, right? And this helps acknowledge these spirits and their concerns and allows them to move through us so that we are no longer carrying their burden, right? And so we can feed them and release them so they're not restless because some of the survival fears that I think we're experiencing um, and some of the fears that are being activated by this election cycle, I think come from our DNA, come from ancestral spirits, come from the people who have come before us, right? And fears around rise of fascist governments or like, immigration, right? These fears also are the fears that we're carrying in our DNA and in our blood from our ancestors. And so I think a lot of what comes up is activating ancestral trauma and intergenerational trauma, right? From our ancestors who may have had similar fears. And as we witness these events, our ancestors become activated and the dead becomes restless. So how can we clear that out so we're not operating from a place of ancestral fear or intergenerational trauma? So I think this is another way that Halloween can be really helpful with the Pluto Mars aspect. So the last thing that I want to say about this is Pluto and Mars is about power struggles, right? About who holds power and where we are able to access power, right? And fighting for power or feeling powerless, needing to take martial action to reclaim power or assert power. And so one of the things that I find gross about power is that it is oftentimes looked at as power over, right? I have power in this way, and I'm afraid that the people under me are going to take my power, so I need to prevent that through action, right? Through suppression, through laws. And this is one of the models that we operate, one of the power models that we operate on in this country, in this world, in capitalism, in patriarchy. Right? And I think it's pretty gross. And for a long time, has made me be like, ugh, I don't want that. Right. But uh, what does it look like if we shift our understanding and think about having power with, right, horizontal power structures, which I think is like one of the benefits of Pluto's time in Aquarius can be developing more horizontal power structures and understanding how we can hold power with instead of power over or power against, right? And so we can also think about where do we hold power in ourselves, right? Where do you hold power? And how does it feel for you to have power? There's societal power like economic status, gender, skin color, etc. And there's also internal power, right? The power to lift or to do, to take action, right? And there's also the felt sense of power. Like, where do you feel power in your body, right? What does it feel like when you hold power? What does it feel like when you have power? What does it feel like for you to be powerful? And just spending a little time this week tuning into that, noticing, okay, I feel empowered, right? Is there a posture? Is there a stance? Is there a way that you breathe? Is there a way that you act? Is there a way that you speak, right? And just being able to notice that, right? So I know that I've been yammering on for quite a while now, but I just want to tell you about one more transit that's happening on Saturday, excuse me, Sunday, November the 3rd, same day that we were getting this Mars opposition to Pluto. We were also getting Venus in Sagittarius opposing Jupiter retrograde in Gemini at 20 degrees and 17 arc minutes of these mutable signs. And so this can be helpful. This is a resource place. It's an opposition, so we have a tension there, right? And oppositions are seen as hard aspects, right? However, this is two benefic planets, and the ancients say that when we have benefic planets in relationship, even if it's a challenging relationship like an opposition or a square, they are still benefic, right? And so it can mean that there is less good, or it's not as good as it could be, but it's still good. And you know what? I'm gonna take it, right? And so Venus brings sweetness and Jupiter brings hope. And so, you know, this opposition can bring a little sweetening, it can bring a little ease, right? And to think about like, how do we sweeten our relationships? How do we sweeten ourselves? How do we sweeten this situation, right? How do we bring hope, right? That tomorrow will be better than today, right? Or like, where do we find optimism? Where can we put our faith? And what can we do that helps to bring ease to our lives, right? Over this weekend and over this week? And how do we come into connection with the resources that are available to us? And you might want to take some time this week as we were moving through this week and just note and name and list, right, your resources, maybe gather them, right? Because as we feel activated through the Scorpio new moon, through this Mars Pluto opposition, we're going to want to like come back into a sense of safety and tune into our resources, right? And so to think about also like, where do we cultivate hope and what can we put our faith in? Right. And so the downside of this opposition can be overindulgence, right? Because if Venus likes pleasure, Jupiter likes more pleasure, right? And sometimes too much of a good thing might not actually be a good thing. So one way that this could look is that we are feeling pretty activated and upset through the Pluto-Mars opposition, right? And we go into pleasure-seeking behaviors to self-soothe, right? Drugs, sex, rock and roll, trying not to feel the feelings of activation, right? Maybe we get into a fight with a friend or a partner, then we go to the bar and try to like drink that away, right? And forget about it. And maybe that works in the short term, right? But that emotional charge hasn't really been processed and it's just getting shoved back into the shadow that then provides more fuel for the next eruption, right? In January, right? And so what we don't want to do is like perpetuate cycles as we are trying to self-soothe. What we want to do is allow this energy to move cleanly through us and find resources that help to sweeten or support or to expand our capacity to be with or to have faith and hope that we can move through this. And, Venus is also connection with friends and community. So expanding our kind of social network that can help us hold the big energy that is moving through us, right? Instead of being like, oh, I'm feeling bad, I'm going to self-soothe through shutting down or, checking out or just like overindulging because I don't think that's actually going to be helpful. Also, desperate times call for desperate measures. So do what you got to do, right? But also, again, this week, what I would suggest is building your resource network and your support network, right? Because, as we are feeling this activation and as we are moving through the big archetypes of these planetary relationships and through Halloween, right, it can bring up a lot of stuff. And so we want to find ways of like coming back into social connection and back into regulation that are supportive and not just like numbing out, checking out, overindulging, or like suppressing and perpetuating these cycles. And with that, my friends, that is all the astro weather that is fit to print. We also have Mars entering Leo and Venus trining Chiron, but maybe we'll talk about that next week because I've been talking a lot. Just a heads up, I have a weekly astrology themed radio show called the Melee Report. I recorded my latest episode late last night, and it is out today. I will put a link in the YouTube for you to check out. Also, a link in my stories for you to listen to if you are so inclined. It is a lot of this information, but less talk, more rock. It's each radio show, I find music that fits with the astrological themes. I play them and then I talk about it, much like any other radio show, but with an astrological vibe. So check that out. And then next week for the Day of the Dead, I will be doing my total request for the Dearly Departed Halloween Extravaganza Volume 5. So, yeah, if you have somebody that you care about, that you miss, that you love, who has passed on, and you would like to dedicate a song to them, please hit me up. And you can find me on Instagram at Blind Stallion Space Wizard. You can comment on the YouTube. You can email me. You can text me. You can join my Patreon and comment there. I don't know. I'm out there. You know the name. Look up the number and send me your shout outs and dedications, and I'll be happy to get them on the air for you. Let me know who you are, who you're sending a dedication to, what song you would like me to play, and if there's a little, dedication that you would like me to read. No pressure, but this is a great way of honoring our dearly departed, and it's a really good time. So yeah, if you'd like to participate, please hit me up, and we'll hook you up. Also, I am doing a deep dive into 2025 with the brilliant astrological team of Michael Bartlett, Sam Reynolds, and the bad pastor Lindsay Turner. That'll be happening live and in person in Santa Fe, and also through the tubes of the internet on November the 9th. I'll be putting a link in my show notes and in my stories if you would like to check that out and find all the astrology that you need to know for this upcoming year. And then last, certainly not least, tonight um, we are beginning our four-part series on exorcism and possession through a theological, astrological, and psychological lens. This will be happening tonight, the 28th, tomorrow, the 29th, the next day, the 30th, and then I believe on November the 3rd, we are doing our final roundtable discussion about astrology and possession. I will put some links in the show notes about that. If you want to sign up, today is the last day, I believe, to sign up for it. So get it while it's hot because it's going to be a spooky good time. I am super excited about it. And you can listen to me talk all about my thoughts on exorcism and possession, which I assure you are many, and there will be a plethora of supernatural references up in there. I guarantee it. So, yeah, that's all the stuff that I got. Oh, yeah, I also got a Patreon, and Patreon is a great way to support this ongoing process so I don't have to get a real job. If you would like to check it out, you can find me over there at Patreon/Camp Wizard Camp. And yeah, until next time, I'll see you all for another week in space. Same wizard time, same wizard channel. And until then, be well, my friends, and take care of yourselves and have a spooky, good Halloween. All right. And Lynn, I got your DM. I will get that in the show for you. Thank you so much. And anybody else out there who wants to hit me up so we can play your requests for the dead. All right. Bye, everybody.